Oh shit, I forgot to say, so, right, I'm recording this at the end of the video, but, hi, you're in the beginning. I forgot to say that, there will be no nudity, no sexuality in this video. As you have seen, an increasing amount of content here on Pornhub is sex-free, is about ideas, and so on. By the way, speaking of history, this was actually probably the majority of content consumed by sort of the mainstream community before Pornhub took over, right around the time that we are about to discuss. Anyway, let's get back to the video. I don't even know how this little bit's gonna fit in. Oh, fuck. Oh. Oh. Oh, hey guys. Shoot, I didn't see you there. Did you notice my nudge? Yeah, this is actually, hold on, let me come a little bit closer. I think I fucked this up. Yeah, so absolutely, this is an original actually, and it's 100% natural. So, and I made it myself. Take a headband, take some leaves. Actually, this reminds me, that's what this episode is about today. It's about how the Hodge came about. I know that a lot of people recently have been going for the crystal Hodges. I've seen that a lot on social media. So where did the Hodge come from? Why would we wear something that actually makes it difficult sometimes, particularly early versions, for us to look up? Keep in mind that this was invented when the sky was blue. Fudge, you can... And remember, that's when sometimes it would rain, things like that. It was invented in 0DT, or if you're familiar with the old calendar, 2020 AD, or also called CE. My followers enjoy history, and so I'm sure you know about the coronavirus COVID-19, also called sometimes the Wuhan virus, which happened in year 0. Okay, so you're probably wondering, holy smokes, the Hodge was invented 500 years ago? Well, not quite. Okay, so we know about the pandemic. We also know about the catastrophe. Okay, so but let's review so we can see how these events relate to the modern day Hodge. So imagine year 0, right? There's this pandemic going around, right? And this is when the Great was president of what was called the United States. And what happened was, you've got this pandemic, you've got all these people, of course, that are quarantined or isolated, they're all inside. And what we see as we look at sort of the lineage, or the best, most definitive lineage of the accessory that we can find, we see that you've got all these videos of people just at home, quarantining, self-isolating because they're concerned with the virus. Meanwhile, Mother was starting to sort of recuperate, right? And so you've got grass growing a little bit, you know, not cities covered, but grass growing where a lot of people had been walking and so on. Particularly, you've got animals coming out of the woodwork, which was a term that they would often use. You got all these animals that are sort of going places where they were afraid to go because humans, which were called Homo sapiens, were there. That was terrible phrasing. I should have written a script for this. But essentially you've got all these animals in canals and in rivers who weren't yet in the air, so nothing changed there. But you've got all these animals on the ground that you didn't usually see. And crows, particularly in Paris, in what was at the time France, which is modern day Julia, you've got these crows that are all of a sudden becoming very bold, right? And by the way, quick fact, that is not where the term murder for a group of crows comes from. This event is not where that comes from. The term murder actually predates the crowtastrophe, which not everybody knows. So you've got all these crows, they're becoming really bold, right? And in fact, these farms used to have what were called scarecrows, and that would be, it was a fake man, a straw man, which is what straw man fallacy is based on. You had these straw men called scarecrows, one word. And what farmers would do is they would put these scarecrows up in a field, and then anybody who came by, no, sorry, I messed that up. I was thinking about how long this video is. Because back in the day, you couldn't do a video like this. You wouldn't have an audience. So anyway, you've got these scarecrows. Well, because this is, of course, before train of thought processing and all these other, emotional communication and so on. So actually what you would be seeing back in zero, you would actually just be seeing me talking and hearing me talk. That would be the only thing that you would really be experiencing from this. So of course people would get very bored very quickly. Right, so you've got all these crows, of course, and one of them, the story goes, but of course there's not a lot of video footage of this period in history outside of people's homes. Right? The TikTok empire started sort of during this time. So anyway, we've got all these, so we don't have a whole lot of video footage, but what historians think happened is that you've got these crows that are now more comfortable on the farm, because it's like the scarecrow represents a human being, but I'm not all that afraid of human beings. It's just one in a big field, right? Likewise, crows in, in the parks and in the cities, wherever, they were getting more bold. Okay, so these crows are now comfortable being on the farm, and this may just be sort of an urban legend. We really don't have enough evidence to say decisively or definitively, but you've got all these crows and they see the termination of a cow. So, okay, yes, in year zero, we were still eating beef, and we were still farming animals, right? So there was very little hunting. There were no wild cows at the time. So anyway, so what they would do typically is when they were ready to get the meat, they would shoot it in the brainstem, basically. Okay. And a crow, I guess, sees that. And we can't know because we had no technology to understand what crows were thinking at this time, right? And we did slightly underestimate their intelligence. So anyway, so they're looking at, they see this and they get this idea, wait a minute, I have a beak. If all these mammals, these cows can be killed so easily, why don't I do that to a human? And of course, that's where you have the crowtastrophe, where you've got all these crows individually going around and killing humans. So we've got the Naj. Now, Naj is actually, as most of you probably know, depending on how old you are, Naj, and whether you already studied this, Naj comes from the word unagi, which is the Japanese word for the back of your neck, for nape, where you wear the Naj. And so it was initially invented by a woman called Llewellyn Haddock, which at the time would have been pronounced Jacqueline. Same spelling, but it was pronounced Jacqueline at the time. And some people attribute the change to a pair of African Americans, which is what they were called. So anyway, so you've got these murderous crows and murders of crows. Okay, so Jaqueline, she's the first one. We don't know sort of what it was initially, except that it was black from videos, and she puts this thing to protect the back of her neck. Because the crows hunted individually, they never came straight on. It was always brainstem. That was the only way they knew would kill the person. So it started actually to protect the brainstem. That's where the notch comes from. Now, of course, it won't protect anything because the ones that we use tend to be very thin, flimsy, entirely decorative. But yeah, that's where it comes from. Remember that a lot of people at this time also lived indoors. That means they slept indoors, they amused themselves indoors, they cooked indoors, they ate indoors. A lot of time was spent indoors. But of course, our ancestors, who very quickly sort of adapted this technology, were lived often like this. Which brings me to the bonus. I'm going to give you a bonus because this is our first episode of Odd History. I'm going to give you a bonus, which is where the term or the expression, "Hey, that's my branch breaking leg," comes from. So because a lot of our ancestors, and of course this was before laser sight, in order to break a branch, what you would need to do often, here I'll take one of these. Take it like this, and let's say you're standing up, I don't want to move the camera, and you go like that. Oh, perfect. So you go like that, and sometimes if it doesn't break, of course, what it does is it leaves a bruise. Okay, and that's where the expression comes from. Basically meaning, of course, that, hey, you are hurting me in a spot where I'm already tender and in a way that's going to interfere with my future sort of success. That's, your other expressions that we think they had at the time were things like, "Oh, you're wrapping my right hand." That may have been a little bit later, but I think it's around this time. We're still talking about around the year 0. Which is when our ancestors were first sort of when other members of the species were first weeded out. Yeah, so there you go. So that's where that expression comes from, because sometimes you would misjudge the strength of the branch and you bruise your leg. Then somebody, would tap you there because, of course, because during the recovery, when we had all these, during the Great Recovery, when we had all these different options, alternatives to shaking hands, one of them was the one that, obviously did not last, was people would knee each other in the thigh, gently. And then, our ancestors would be like, "Hey, buddy, this is alternative to handshake is not going to work because that's my branch breaking leg," And so that hurts when you do that because it's already bruised and you're worsening the bruise, which means it's harder for me to break branches for my fire in the future. So there you go. So there's your bonus. Don't forget to please subscribe. I'm going to probably script these going forward. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you think that because this is my first time adding just a taste of anger to interesting fact videos. I'm wondering how it affects sort of your processing of the information and just the enjoyability of the experience and how much you're able to relate to, our ancestors who obviously went through a difficult time to bring us into this society today. I'm not sure, I don't want to put the anger, especially if that's going to trigger some people, but there we go.